Coffee with Charli. This is a series presented by Figma and hosted by me, Charli Marie, where I get to sit down with some of the designers behind the systems that run some of your favorite products, some of your favorite websites. We take a look behind the scenes and inside the Figma files of these design systems to learn how they work and what challenges they overcame in setting them up. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Nick Dorman and James Davis of News UK. Nick is the head of design systems at News UK, and James is a lead designer on the design systems team. They have implemented a multi-brand design system through Figma fairly recently, so we're getting to hear from them today how they've set up a system that can work for all of News UK's brands, from The Sun to Times and everything in between. Welcome, Nick and James, to Coffee with Charli. I'm excited to learn more about this multi-brand system that you've got, and especially because it is so new, right? We can get to hear about the adoption process of it, how it really started while things are still fresh. So this is going to be great. Let's start by talking about the birth of this multi-brand design system. How did it get started?
Yeah, okay. So News UK is made up of multiple different businesses, and they all have separate product teams. Multiple product teams in some cases, and historically nothing has really been shared across businesses. So there's a lot of waste, there's a lot of inefficiency, and we certainly saw inconsistency kind of increasingly creeping into the products. So in July 2019, we created a new centralized design system team. That's our team, and we're responsible for supporting the teams across News UK with ways of working, providing best practice guidance, tooling, and the design system deliverables like the code components and the design components. So the approach is to build a multi-brand design system. That's the approach we took from the off. So it's a single design system that's used by all the brands, which, that was definitely ambitious. I think a lot more ambitious than we foresaw. We have a lot of brands, and we've got brands like the Times and the Sun, and there's a lot of heritage behind those brands. They have very strong identities.
Yeah. Very different identities too.
Very different identities, very different audiences as well. And obviously we had to create components that work for all of these brands, and then the design foundations and a theming system that would standardize the fundamentals of design across the board, but allow the flexibility to cater for the nuances of each particular brand.
Yeah. And how big is this design systems team working on the system?
So it started off fairly small. We grew rapidly over the first year. We now have 5 designers working on the design system, and around 10 engineers, and we're split into 2 squads.
And what are those 2 squads?
So the squads are really set up as a result of some kind of initial challenges we were having around adoption. There's a development squad who are really focusing on the core design system deliverables, the components, and then there's a experience squad, and they're focused on supporting adoption across the business. So really working with teams to adopt NewsKit, which is the name of the design system, and just make sure that things are running smoothly, help on board, demo to teams, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we're going to get into looking at that, about ways that you're helping teams to adopt the system once we dive into Figma. But let's talk about Figma first. So you initially tried to build this system, or thought about building the system in Sketch, right? What made you decide to go with Figma instead, and how's that been?
So I think there are a number of reasons. It became clear that we needed to make the switch really as the system matured. We felt that the tooling was becoming a bit of a barrier to adoption. We needed to standardize the processes across all of the design teams. And we wanted to make the design system central to the design process. And then the management of the system for our team was a particular problem. We were finding we couldn't scale because we were spending a lot of time rolling out changes across multiple libraries rather than having one centralized library.
Yep.
Which all the teams, if we could manage, then all the teams could use. We couldn't achieve that with the previous tooling, but we have managed to achieve that in Figma. We've developed a plugin, which we'll show off, which helps us manage that. And then lockdown and working from home were a really big factor as well. Obviously, we wanted to be continue collaborating across the design discipline. And, it's obviously not easy when everyone's remote, but Figma really helped with that. It made it easier for designers to view each other's work, and it really helped us unify the design team around a single tool.
Yeah, that's important, right? That's like, what's the point of having a design system if it's different in different places and some people are using it, some aren't? All right, well, shall we jump into Figma and take a look around? James is going to introduce us to the system, and we'll see some of these cool plugins that you've got.
Yeah, hey Charlie. So just going to show you a bit about our setup that we have in Figma. So how our different brands get to see Figma, and how as a design system team we structure our files within Figma. So we originally adopted this at the beginning of the year. So we've been using it, let's say about 6 months in total. So it's been a big team effort across the board to really get everybody switched over. But what we have is we have a design system team workspace, and within that we have various libraries. So we have a theme or multiple themes. We have an icon library, a utilities library, and a web gallery library. And then we have some supplementary sort of documentation with our components. So that's our workspace, and we work through that. But as a brand like the Times, they have a design system set up. So they have their own unique icons, their own unique theme. 2 themes in this instance, and then they also have their various project files, and you can see there's a light blue version and a dark blue version. One is for UX projects solely, and one is for UI projects solely, and sometimes there's a two, so you can quite easily just sort of jump in and see. Within those files, they're structured very similar across the board. So we set up various workspaces for both UI designers and UX designers, so they can open up template projects and they'll see a similar sort of structure on the left-hand side here. A blank template for a UI project file. So a designer can come in here, customize their cover, let everybody know what the project's about, and they can also set the status and things like that. There's an about section here where people can add some various documentation, who's working on the project team, a playground area whereby people can just explore, chuck anything they want in there, and that's very much their sandbox area. Section here, which is their final UI, so consisting of the different breakpoints and maybe the different screens. And so setting up that structure just allows us within the teams to be able to sort of cross-pollinate a little bit. So if you work on one project one day, you might then jump into somebody else's file the following day, and you'll know exactly where to find certain things. So it's been really key to us to have this sort of structure down the left-hand side, and that everybody can then follow across the board. So that's a sort of canvas ready to go for UI and UX designers.
And this is something that you set up when you deliver the system, right? To help the designers use it, help them get into Figma and get into using the design system, that they had this all set up and ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we initially took the journey to move over to Figma, we wanted to make sure that everybody was clear how we could work. So we created a ways of working documentation and then ran a series of workshops. And as part of these workshops, we gathered a bit of feedback about how people are working and started then to produce a series of templates, of which one of these is one of the templates that people can spin up and use out of the box. So
yeah, that's great. And I love that it came from research with the team too. Of course, that's the way a designer would approach building a template.
Exactly, internal research. It's been cool. So everybody has access to those. And then we've denoted certain files. So like the design system file within the Times is denoted with a protractor, and then these rockets for the projects. And then there's the archive file as well, which, everything, has a bit of a lifespan. If it's not immediately being used, we tend to just get rid of the clutter from these project files and just chuck them into the archive as well. Yeah. So that's how our teams are structured. We've got tons of brands, and if you went to any one of the brands and within our sort of work environment, they would all be structured the same, and so that just keeps a bit of consistency across the organization.
I love that. It's like you've got a design system for all the components and like the visual aspects, the UX, but also for the design process as well, is what you're systematizing. That's great.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. So in terms of the libraries that we offer, we've got a sections library, and a sections library is almost slices of the key websites that we have.
Okay.
So if you were to go to the Times, you would see, you know, maybe they've got a homepage, landing page, those kind of things. So they're ready to go, and people can theme those with our theming plugin. We also have the theme files, and icon libraries, and a utilities library. And I'll get into those in a moment. But the utilities library came again from some research that actually UX designers and UI designers wanted some sort of auxiliary components that were maybe not for the UI, but actually to communicate their design. So things like annotations,
Right.
things like devices where they could sort of showcase things. And then finally, we've got the web gallery. So at the moment, we're focusing on one platform, which is web. And we have that web gallery there, which is a host of our components.
Nice. Let's get in and take a look at how you would theme a component to match one of these different brands.
Sure. So we have a foundations file. So this is our sort of theme. So behind the scenes, we have a series of colors, a color palette that a brand can go in and create their own color palettes, and any unique ones that are associated with them. We have a whole host of colors here that are applied for semantic sort of purposes. So we have inks. Inks are based for our iconography and our typography. And so we have a series of those, and there's ink base, ink contrast, ink subtle, depends on, you know, how visual you want on the screen. Then we have interface colors, and interface colors are for those sort of static sort of UI elements. So it might be the background colors on page load, or backgrounds of cards and those sort of structural parts. And then finally, we have interactives as well. And interactives are used for things like our buttons and you know, all of those interactive parts, toggles, switches, and things like that. And then we have typography. Typography has evolved and grown over the time, but because we predominantly work in a sort of media-rich environment, we needed to kind of have expressive typography, which is what we call our editorial typography. And so we've got headlines there, we have sub-headlines, captions, quotes, and those kind of things. And then we've got utility typography, and utility typography is used mainly for things like forms and to make things very legible, whereas, you know, in contrast to those very expressive typography tokens that we have. And then we have some shadows, some overlays, grids, and that. So the idea is that brands can come into this file, customize it how they wish to be a reflection of their brands. And once they've got that, that is their theme. Okay, so here we have a blank project file here, just chucked on one of the card components. So the card component in our sort of environment for editorial and the brands is one of the key kind of components that we have. So, you know, it would be an image and a summary of maybe an article. But we also have a whole load of components that we're constantly evolving and building, and they're broken down into actions and inputs, feedback status, layout, media, navigation, and text. So here we've got the card components, and this is the theme swapper plugin that we have available to all of our designers. And you can see some of the key brands that we've got in this demo example here. And so we have a UX area, we have Times Radio, and we have Talk Sports and a few other Virgin Radio and things like that. So a title can just, we've got one central library now of the components. Before, when we started, we had multiple libraries and it was quite difficult to manage. So we have one central library, and then a designer can drag on a component and they can apply a theme to it. So in this instance, you can see it's just updating to almost looks like a very sort of low fidelity skeleton version. And that's quite key to our UX process, where maybe designers don't want to show all of the content when they're sort of researching.
Yeah, they want to distract, right?
Exactly, yeah, the content can get in the way sometimes, and then we have an extra fidelity, which is very much black and white, you know, sort of monochrome for the UX. And then we can also take it a step further and we can see, you know, how maybe Virgin Radio would also look with that, and you can see that the colors are switching out, the typography is switching out. So that was very much, that was off of the birth of using the Figma plugin. But then we took it a step further within our team to build our own plugin. And it's something I'd like to demonstrate, which is how we can actually not only switch out colors and styles and things like that, but how we can switch out images using our theming plugin. And then finally, how can we switch out the content as well, so the copy. Sure. And so in this example here is we've got a radio player screen from one of the apps, and you can see it's very low fidelity at the moment, and we can take that up to a slightly higher fidelity. So this is an agnostic design for a sort of landing screen for a radio app that we have. We have multiple radio stations as part of News UK, and you can see the low fidelity design here. So then we can take it one step further and show a slightly higher fidelity wireframe, and then we can see how the styles switch out for other brands. So in this instance, this is the Times Radio, and then we have a version for Talk Sport as well. And then Virgin Radio, and you can see the colors are switching out, the typography styles are switching out. If we then take it a step further, we can also start to introduce how the media switches out as well. So again, the very low fidelity design, but then we can see how Times Radio would also look with this. So here's with the Times Radio, and then we can apply the Talk Sports theme as well. Yeah, so here we can see that now the logo has changed, the background image has changed, and the presenters on the left-hand side have changed as well. But yeah,
I love that you built this yourself as well, a plugin, to solve your own needs. And I know there's another cool plugin that you built yourself to do with text cropping as well. Can you show us that?
We have developed a text crop plugin, and so what the text crop plugin can do is it can get rid of any space that's above or below either the cap height, in this instance, the ascender, and you can see that purple line moving, or the X height, depending on where we want to cap to. So we actually cap to the cap height and in the baseline, but you could also do the descender as well. So that way, every title that uses typography is the same. It's almost like the cap height to the baseline is the same across every typeface that we have. So what that means is when we're using auto layout functionality within Figma, everything gets butted up next to each other. So if we take this instance here, you can see that at the moment, all of our typography is starting at that A and also finishing finishing at the baseline. And so you're not getting that extra space. And that means that our spaces on the 4-pixel baseline just keep very consistent across the board. And so we can just drag in a component and then run this plugin in the background, and it just automatically updates as we go.
Love it. So you've got all this set up now. It's been going out to teams. You were doing things like setting up workspaces in advance to get them used to it and get them familiar. How's it been? How has the adoption process been, Nick?
Great, to be honest. Yeah, I think the moving to Figma, moving to a new tool, it took a little while to get all the teams, on board and to agree that that was the best approach. But since we've moved, I really feel it's been the catalyst for, designers getting excited about the design system. There's been a real renewed interest in, and I think enthusiasm as well for the tooling and, actually learning a new tool. So there's a few things that we've implemented since we moved over to Figma. For example, we have a weekly drop-in clinic, that's intended as a sort of dedicated time that the teams can come and ask us any questions or ask for support around using the design system. And when we moved over to Figma, we started doing demos of Figma features to help with the onboarding process. And they went down really well. We actually increased engagement in those sessions significantly. Amazing. So we've continued to do that. We do demos weekly. New Figma features or particular kind of components in the design system that are new.
it's really cool when you can get designers excited about process details, right? Like that is no small feat. So your team's done a great job of making it easy for people and making them excited about it as well. What advice would you have to anyone else looking to build a multi-brand design system? What have you learned, do you think, in these early stages of yours so far that you can pass on to other people?
So you certainly need to consider the level of flexibility that you're going to offer upfront. In our experience, greater flexibility corresponds to greater complexity. So it's really worth taking the time to look at the product portfolio and really determine how locked down you think you can make the system.
Yeah, so there's the upfront work that you had to do, right? All the research, card sorting, things like that, in order to make the system a success. Wasn't just in the setup of the components in Figma itself. It was all of that research that went into it as well.
You must be proactive around adoption. It's not something that just happens. You really need to actively promote and sell the benefits of the system, demonstrate the benefits, and treat it as you would any other product, really. And listen to the consumers and ensure that you're tailoring your offering to their goals.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really great point. Thank you so much, Nick and James, for walking us through the system. I'm excited to maybe check back in future episode, in years to come, and see how the design system has progressed, as it's matured and as it gets used more. But thanks for sharing. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it interesting to hear about the challenges that the team have been facing and how they've been overcoming them. The News UK team have shared a Figma file through the Figma community, which is a resource for onboarding. This was something they created for their team to help figure out what components and which parts of the library they needed to pay attention to most, sort of like a Figma design system onboarding file. And they've created it as a template for anyone else to see and get inspiration from, copy for their team as well. So check that out. That'll be linked in the description. If you would like to see a certain team or company featured on Coffee with Charli, please leave your suggestions down below in the comments. We'd love to hear who you want to see featured on this series. Make sure you subscribe to the Figma YouTube channel if you're enjoying it and you want to see more pop up in your subscription feed. And if you want to check out my channel, it's over at Charli Marie TV on YouTube. I make videos about the design process, life as a creative director at a tech company, and all of that sort of stuff. So hopefully we'll see you over there and see you back here for the next episode in the series sometime soon. Bye.